She waited 27 years to feel loved again, then shot the man who made her believe in forever on the day he married someone else. Margaret Ellison lived a quiet but carefully constructed life in Perth, Australia. At 54, she had achieved everything people were supposed to admire: financial independence, a spacious home overlooking the river, and a career as one of the city's most trusted real estate agents. Yet when the workday ended and the front door closed, silence filled the rooms. Her grown children lived abroad, her friends were busy with their own families, and nights stretched long and empty. Margaret often sat by her window, sipping wine and wondering if she had already lived the best parts of her life. The thought terrified her. She had tried dating again, but found most encounters disappointing. Men her age wanted someone younger, and younger men saw her as a curiosity, not a partner. Still, she refused to let time define her. She dressed elegantly, maintained her health, and carried herself with confidence, even when loneliness pressed hard against her. Beneath her polished exterior was a woman yearning for something that felt alive, something that reminded her she was still capable of being wanted. That desire grew stronger each year. She filled her schedule with work to avoid confronting the ache that lingered when she came home to an empty house. Friends praised her independence, but they didn't see the nights she cried quietly, wishing someone would choose her again. Then one summer morning, while touring a luxury apartment complex, she met a young fitness trainer named Jason Reed. He was everything she had forgotten existed: charming, attentive, and full of energy. When he smiled at her, she felt the years melt away. For the first time in decades, Margaret's heart stirred with possibility. She didn't know it yet, but that single meeting would begin the slow unraveling of her carefully built world. Jason Reed was 27, ambitious, and endlessly confident. He had grown up in a modest neighborhood outside Perth, the youngest of 3 brothers, all of whom had left school early to work. Jason wanted more. His good looks and charm opened doors that money couldn't, and he quickly learned how to use both to his advantage. Working as a personal trainer allowed him to move among wealthy clients, offering more than fitness advice. He was personable, attentive, and made everyone feel seen. Beneath his easy smile, though, was a man driven by hunger for a better life. He understood people like Margaret before they even spoke. Older clients often sought more than exercise. They craved attention, validation, and company. Jason provided all of that effortlessly. He listened, complimented, and remembered small details that made his clients feel special. But deep down, he viewed these relationships as stepping stones towards something greater: financial security and social access. He wanted the life of the clients he trained, not the grind that kept him working 6 days a week. When Margaret hired him, he immediately noticed her elegance and poise. She wasn't like the others. She carried herself with grace and authority. Their sessions were filled with laughter and long conversations that stretched beyond fitness. Jason saw opportunity wrapped in kindness. She paid generously, invited him to dinners, and began introducing him to her friends. What started as professional soon slipped into something blurred and intoxicating. Jason didn't resist. The comfort she offered was addictive. Her world was one he had only dreamed of entering. Every time she looked at him with admiration, he felt powerful. Yet even as he enjoyed the luxury she brought into his life, a quiet voice inside him whispered that he was playing a dangerous game. Their connection deepened quickly, though neither of them ever defined it out loud. What began as casual flirtation after training sessions evolved into late-night visits, expensive dinners, and weekend trips disguised as business getaways. Margaret felt alive in a way she hadn't for years. Jason's attention reignited something she thought was gone forever: a sense of being seen and desired. She began buying him gifts, small at first, then more extravagant: designer watches, new clothes, even help with his rent. Each gesture made her feel needed, and each thank you from him pulled her deeper into the illusion of love. Jason, however, saw their relationship differently. He liked Margaret, even admired her, but what he truly loved was the comfort she provided. She treated him like someone important, someone who mattered. He enjoyed the way people looked at them when they walked into a restaurant together, the curiosity, the envy. Yet as the months passed, guilt began to mix with boredom. Margaret wanted closeness, while he craved freedom. Her affection, once flattering, started to feel like a cage. To the outside world, They maintained appearances. He was her trainer, her companion at social events, her friend. But behind closed doors, it was something complicated and messy, built on need and imbalance. Margaret began talking about a future together, imagining shared vacations, a new home, maybe even marriage. Jason nodded along but avoided commitment. The more she planned, the more he withdrew, answering calls less often and canceling sessions with vague excuses. Margaret sensed the shift but convinced herself it was temporary. She believed love would win him back, that their bond was too strong to fade. What she couldn't see was that Jason's heart had already begun drifting elsewhere, toward a new secret that would soon destroy them both. Margaret's unease began as a faint whisper in her mind, the kind that's easy to ignore. Jason's habits were changing, missed calls, shorter texts, and sudden disappearances explained away with flimsy excuses. He claimed to be working longer hours or traveling for fitness seminars, but his stories rarely added up. The small inconsistencies piled up until they became impossible to dismiss. She started checking his social media more often, searching for signs of where he was and who he was with. At first, she found nothing unusual, but then came a tag, a photo of Jason at a cafe with a woman she didn't recognize. Margaret brushed it off, convincing herself it was a client or friend. Yet days later, when Jason left his gym bag at her house, curiosity got the better of her. Inside, buried beneath workout clothes, she found a cream-colored wedding invitation. The names printed in gold letters hit her like a blow: Jason Reed and Chloe Saunders. For a long moment, she couldn't breathe. The man who had promised her love, who had spent nights in her arms, was marrying someone else. And worse, the wedding was only weeks away. Her mind reeled with disbelief. Every sweet message, every promise of forever now felt like a cruel performance. She tried to call him, but he didn't answer. His silence screamed louder than any words could. The realization settled in like ice. He had been using her. Anger mixed with heartbreak, forming something toxic inside her chest. She told no one what she had found, too ashamed to admit the truth. That night, Margaret stared at her reflection in the mirror and saw not the confident woman she once was, but someone betrayed, aging, and utterly disposable. And deep inside, something began to fracture. The days after discovering the invitation blurred into one long, sleepless stretch of torment. Margaret replayed every memory with Jason, searching for clues she had missed. Every affectionate word now sounded hollow, every smile rehearsed. Her heartbreak quickly morphed into anger, so consuming it left no room for reason. She watched videos of Jason and his fiancée online, their faces glowing with happiness, while her own reflection grew harder to recognize. What hurt most wasn't just the betrayal. It was the humiliation. She had believed in him, defended him, even dreamed of growing old together. Now she was the fool in a story everyone else already knew. At work, she struggled to maintain her composure. Colleagues noticed her distraction, clients sensed her tension, but she brushed it all off. Behind closed doors, she broke down. Nights became a ritual of wine, scrolling, and rage. She followed every wedding update posted online, reading comments congratulating the couple. Each one stung like salt in an open wound. Her love had turned to obsession, and obsession into something darker. She began to imagine confrontations, what she would say if she saw him, how he might react, and how it would feel to make him see what he had done to her. The betrayal consumed her completely. Sleep brought no peace. Dreams of Jason smiling beside another woman haunted her. Even her home, once her sanctuary, felt tainted by his memory. She gathered the gifts she had bought him, watches, shirts, even a gold bracelet, and smashed them in fury. What once symbolized love now represented deceit. By the time the wedding week arrived, Margaret was no longer the same woman. The heartbreak that had broken her spirit was hardening into resolve. Somewhere inside her, the thought began to whisper, he couldn't just walk away. Margaret's thoughts grew darker as the wedding approached. What had begun as heartbreak was now a relentless obsession that consumed every waking moment. She followed every trace of Jason's life online, memorizing details about the venue, the guest list, and even the floral arrangements his bride had chosen. It wasn't enough to simply know. She needed to see, to confront, to make him understand the devastation he had caused. Her pain twisted into a sense of purpose. She told herself it wasn't revenge she wanted, only closure. But deep down, the line between the two had already vanished. She visited a local firearms store and purchased a small handgun, telling the clerk she lived alone and wanted protection. It was the first time she had ever held a weapon. The weight of it startled her, but it also made her feel powerful. In the days that followed, she practiced holding it in front of her mirror, whispering the words she imagined saying to Jason. The reflection that stared back at her no longer looked like a heartbroken woman. It looked like someone ready to end her suffering by any means necessary. Margaret drove past the vineyard where the wedding would take place, parking at a distance to watch workers setting up chairs and decorations. The sight filled her with both dread and determination. She imagined Jason smiling, holding his bride's hand, thanking guests for coming. The thought made her chest tighten until it felt impossible to breathe. She told herself she only wanted to confront him, to make him see her pain, but her fantasies were no longer peaceful. Each passing day stripped away another layer of restraint. By the eve of the wedding, she had already made up her mind. If she couldn't have peace, neither would he. The morning of the wedding was calm and bright, the kind of day people remember for its perfect weather and gentle breeze. Margaret sat in her car on a quiet road near the vineyard, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She had barely slept, haunted by visions of Jason laughing at her, of Chloe wearing the ring that should have been hers. The gun rested on the passenger seat wrapped in a silk scarf. Her mind swung between hesitation and fury, between the faint hope that she might still turn back and the unshakable belief that it was already too late. Guests began to arrive, their cars filling the gravel lot. Margaret watched them from a distance, her heart pounding in rhythm with the music that drifted from the ceremony area. When Jason stepped out, wearing a light gray suit and smiling for the cameras, something inside her snapped. The world seemed to narrow until only he existed. The man who had used her, humiliated her, and erased her as if she had never mattered. She opened the car door, her movements slow and deliberate, as though guided by something outside herself. She walked through the vineyard unnoticed at first, blending among the guests. Laughter, camera shutters, and the clinking of glasses filled the air. Then she saw him again, standing beside his bride, his hand on her waist. In that instant, all hesitation vanished. She lifted the gun, steady despite the tremor in her body, and fired 3 times. The shots echoed across the open field. Jason fell before anyone understood what had happened. Chaos erupted, screams, running, confusion, but Margaret didn't move. The weapon hung loosely in her hand as she stared at the man who had once made her feel alive, now lifeless on the ground. For a few seconds after the gunfire, everything went silent, as though the world itself had frozen. Then came the screams, piercing, panicked, desperate. Guests scattered in all directions, some ducking behind tables, others running toward the parking lot in disbelief. The bride's white dress turned red as she knelt beside Jason, her cries echoing through the vineyard. Blood spread beneath him, dark and heavy against the grass. Margaret stood motionless, the gun still warm in her hand, her expression unreadable. It was as if she had stepped outside her own body, watching the chaos unfold from somewhere far away. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance. People shouted for help, some trying to stop the bleeding, while others screamed at Margaret to drop the weapon. She didn't resist when security approached her. Instead, she lowered the gun, placed it on the ground, and whispered something no one could fully hear. Witnesses later said she looked strangely calm, almost peaceful, as police handcuffed her and led her away. Jason was pronounced dead before the ambulance arrived. The bride was inconsolable, screaming his name until her voice broke. News of the shooting spread across Perth within hours. Journalists swarmed the area, capturing images of shattered glasses, overturned chairs, and a bouquet lying abandoned near the blood-stained grass. At the police station, Margaret said little. She didn't ask for a lawyer right away. She didn't even cry. When questioned about why she did it, she simply said she couldn't let him make a fool of her. Her voice was flat, detached, as though she were describing something inevitable. As night fell over the city, the once celebrated real estate agent sat in a cold cell, her hands still trembling from what they had done, yet her face eerily composed, almost relieved. The trial became one of the most talked-about cases in Australian media, drawing crowds to the courthouse each day. Reporters lined the steps, eager to capture any glimpse of the woman whose crime had shocked the nation. Margaret Ellison appeared calm during proceedings, her once polished appearance replaced by a plain prison uniform and tired eyes. The prosecution painted her as a woman consumed by jealousy, someone who refused to accept rejection. They described how she manipulated and controlled Jason, using her wealth to keep him bound to her, and when she lost that control, she turned violent. Her defense told a different story, a woman emotionally broken, betrayed by someone she trusted, and pushed past the edge of sanity. They argued that Jason had exploited her loneliness for personal gain, feeding her false hopes while planning a future with another woman. Psychologists testified that Margaret suffered from severe emotional dependency and deteriorating mental health in the months leading up to the shooting. But the jury saw through the layers of sympathy. The facts remained clear. She had bought a gun, driven to the wedding, and pulled the trigger 3 times. Throughout the trial, Chloe Saunders, Jason's fiancée, sat silently in the front row, her eyes red and hollow. She refused to look at Margaret, unable to reconcile the woman before her with the act that had destroyed her life. After days of testimony and emotional outbursts, the verdict was delivered. Margaret Ellison was found guilty of murder. The judge called the act cold, deliberate, and fueled by obsession, sentencing her to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 20 years. As the words echoed through the courtroom, Margaret remained expressionless, staring ahead as if she had already accepted her fate long before the gavel fell. In the years that followed, Margaret Ellison became a ghostly figure within the prison walls, quiet, withdrawn, and often lost in thought. The media moved on to new stories, but her name lingered in public memory as a symbol of obsession turned deadly. Fellow inmates spoke of her as polite but distant, spending most of her time reading or staring out the window of her cell. She never joined in gossip or fights, never sought attention. To many, she seemed like a woman waiting for something that would never come. Occasionally, journalists tried to reach her for interviews, but she refused most requests. On the rare occasions she did speak, her words were calm and haunting. She didn't deny what she had done, only said that she wished she had walked away sooner. She never mentioned Jason by name again. The house she once owned was sold, the money used to pay legal fees and damages to Jason's family. Her children, unable to face the weight of her actions, cut off contact completely. Outside the prison, Chloe Saunders slowly rebuilt her life, moving away from Perth and starting over in another city. She kept no reminders of the man she was supposed to marry. For her, the tragedy became something she survived rather than something she lived through. Margaret's story continued to circulate in documentaries and crime shows, dissected by experts as a cautionary tale about love, loneliness, and control. Behind the sensational headlines, however, was a simple, devastating truth: a woman who loved too much and a man who never truly loved her back. In the end, Margaret's punishment wasn't just the prison sentence. It was the lifelong silence that followed, the emptiness she had once feared, now made permanent and inescapable.